Good morning, everybody. I hope good morning, good afternoon, and good evening again. I hope everybody can see my screen. And so we will be recording the session today so that it can be shared with everybody later. And I hope it is okay with everyone. All right, then. So welcome to today's session of the CISSP Modular training. Yeah, so we are going to cover security and risk management as part of this training. And I'm Kumar Mariappan. I'll be your host today. And I'm doing this on behalf of Praveen, since he is currently engaged with another activity. So let's start it. The topic of today's agenda would be an introduction to CISSP, of course, a list of topics in domain 1, which is the security and risk management, topic-wise deep coverage, and our Ingram Micro's cybersecurity and privacy services. We will cover on how it is going to help, how we as Ingram Micro can help everybody. All right. So to set the expectations straight, this is more of an introductory training to CISSP. It is not a full-fledged training of CISSP. So we do offer full-fledged training when it comes to CISSP. So we will be covering, as I said earlier, we will be covering an overview of the security and risk management domain of CISSP as part of this. You'll be getting a very high view of CISSP and also about this particular topic, what we are going to cover today. So to know about how you can use it, or how it is more like a teaser or a trailer of a particular domain of CISSP, so that you can get involved a little bit more and get CISSP certified ideally in the end. And sorry about the background noise, if you can hear it. So now let's, this is going to be a CISSP introduction. The next topic is CISSP introduction. So let's make this session an interactive one rather than me speaking on one way and you guys are only listening. Let's not make it one-sided. So just jump in, raise questions, interrupt me from time to time. So it'll be more happy that way and engaged that way, yeah, of course. So introduction of CISSP. So this is going to be a 3-hour exam. Initially, it was a 6-hour exam. Now it has come down to a 3-hour exam. And initially, it was a written exam, and it is not that. It is a computer-based exam now. And usually, it's around 100 to 150 questions, and it is a linear format. And what happens is the passing grade is 700, and the exam progresses based on your answers. It becomes tougher or it becomes easier based on the results of your answers, basically. So to give you an introduction of CISSP, it is one of the most sought out certification in the security industry. And one of the good thing about is recently UK recognized it, or UK's board, educational board has recognized it as a master's degree, or they are comparing it to a master's degree. So that is a very good thing about CISSP. CISSP validates an information. So what it says is it gives a security. It says that a security professional has technical knowledge and managerial knowledge when it comes to security related things across all domains of an IT infrastructure or an organization. And that the person will be capable of managing the overall security posture of an organization. So that is where it is at. It will give you a insight into different things which happens in an organization from a security perspective, and provides you the challenges and ways to address it. So that is what you get out of a CISSP certification. Yeah. So this is typical exam weightage. So security risk management, which is set at the bottom, it's the first domain which we are covering, but it has the highest weightage. and followed by different domains which are available. So these are called common body of knowledge. CISSP has 8 common body of knowledge. So starting with security risk management, security software development, security operations, security assessment and training, identity and access management, communications and network security, security engineering, asset security. So it covers all topics when it comes to an enterprise, and from a security perspective. So it'll talk about physical security, it'll talk about database security, it talks about operational security as well as risk, compliance related risk. It will cover, as it is rather than saying and it will be an in-depth into everything. It is a breadth of knowledge you will acquire when you get into CISSP, or when you are involved with CISSP and when you get your certification out of CISSP. And that is one of the reasons it is now compared to a master's degree in UK. So this is the certification requirements. So let's talk about certification requirement from a work experience perspective. CPE requirements comes after you get the certificate. That is, every year you need to maintain certain CPEs to keep your certificate valid. And to get CISSP, anybody can go write a CISSP exam and pass it. So by passing it, you become an associate of CISSP, but not a CISSP certified. To become CISSP certified, you need to have five years of work experience in at least the 2 domains, or the 2 CBKs which we covered earlier, or a 4 and but then there is a good point. There is one thing which would help if you do not have a 5 years work experience in those domains. Even if you have 4 years of experience, you can do it as long as you have a 4-year college degree or an approved credential, which is there in their website, which satisfies like 1 year, which takes out basically 1 year out of that experience requirement. So if you have any one of those, you just need 4 years of work experience. Even if that is not the case, you still pass the exam, you become an associate of ISC squared. You get an associate certificate. What it means is you get the next 6 years to complete the 5-year work, a 5-year requirement. Or if you're already in a college, if you already have a college degree, so you get a 4-year requirement. So that is what an associate means. So if you're fresh out of a college, you can write an exam, get the certificate and gain the experience required to become CISSP. Once the experience is gathered, you need to reach out to ISC2 so that they can provide you the official CISSP certification. And from that day on, you need to start maintaining CPE requirements and assets. So now we are going to talk about the list of topics in domain 1, which is security risk and management. So these are the topics which we are going to cover as part of today's session under security risk and management. So we will be talking about the governance principles when it comes to security, what is compliance basically. And one of the key things about CISSP is they stress on ethics, and ethics is always important. So we will also be covering professional ethics. Documentation. So what a security documentation is and why is it so important for an organization. Risk management. So in this section, we will be covering what is risk, how we can manage risks, how we can identify risks, and how we can manage risk, of course. Then we will talk about threat modeling, why a threat modeling is needed, how we can customize a threat modeling. So we will speak about business continuity planning, which will also talk about disaster recovery, what we have to do. So COVID-19 is a good use case. So organization with a good BCP plan did not face much of a trouble when you compare it with organization who did not have a good BCP plan. We will also talk about acquisition strategy and practices. and personnel security policies that has to be applied in an organization, and the importance of security awareness and training. So now we are going to cover security governance principles, or what is going to be security governance in basically. So when we talk about governance, it's all about bringing harmony to different activities of an organization. So when we talk about different activities, here we are going to talk about different security related activities. So it's an approach of an organization to enact security. These are like, there will be different methods of control, and they oversee, a governance team will oversee and when it comes to security related activities of an organization. And they will bring together different activities so that an organization or an enterprise can achieve a collective goal in the end when it comes to security of an organization, to better protect it, in one word. And one of the objective would be to mitigate security risk, or the primary objective would be to mitigate security risk of an organization following different approaches. It'll be more of a preventive measure or a proactive measure rather than a reactive measure or a remedial activity which is done to protect an organization. So it will also support business objectives to minimize disruption and cost. And it will also uphold a reputation of an organization. So that's one of the key return of investment when it comes to security for an organization. So a security council is a council of people of an organization. They are there to oversee all the previously mentioned activities. They get insight from all parts of the organization so that they can bring harmony and security to all activities that is done in an organization. So this team will push support for security initiatives, getting the budget, speaking to people, speaking to the right people, convincing people. That is one of their primary responsibilities. So that they need to justify the cost of why we are doing it, so that we can get higher management support and implement the required security for an organization. So their responsibilities include identifying security project initiatives and activities that are required to improve the current organization security posture. So they will also draft or they will create security policies in general. So they will draft, review them periodically. They will recommend best practices from a security view based on the recent trends, in other words. So they will also monitor the existing security program for its efficiency and tweak it as required. And one of the key things is to promote the culture of security in an organization. So when we say promote culture of security, so security is not an individual or an individual's responsibility or an individual team's responsibility. It's a collective responsibility of an organization. So they will try to promote the culture so that it becomes a collective responsibility, so that we can all win together. And they will. The other key thing is to make everything happen. They need to identify and recommend key areas of improvement, which requires, again, development and investment in an organization. So this is a typical organization governance structure. There will be a CISO who will be reporting to the board of directors or the CEO. CISO is the topmost guy when it comes to security in an organization, and he will be handling a security department. And end user teams will be management teams, IT teams, staff, and everyone else in an organization. This is a typical organization governance. The reason why we place CISO in the middle or the security team in the middle is they need to govern everything, and they need to also report the security posture of an organization to the board of directors or the CEO. Security and business alignment. So here we are going to talk about why security professionals must advise decision makers based on the risk. Because security, if we are going to have 100% security, it means that we will not have we cannot have a successful business. 100% security is never possible. In other words, you need to close locked doors, and you cannot allow anybody in or out. That is what 100% security is. But with that, you are not going to run a business. So there will always be a risk. And as a security professional, you need to identify those risks, gauge those risks, and then advise the decision makers on which risks we need to mitigate, or risk management principles to apply risk management principles. So we will cover the risk management principles at a later stage of today's session. And they have to support business constraints, as I mentioned earlier, right? So it's not only about assessing risk and advising the decision makers on what to do and getting investment. It is also about implementing policies, governing over them, creating awareness of expectations, rating the awareness. That is one of the very key things. So when we say about monitor and evaluate effectiveness of controls, we are not only talking about technical controls, we are talking about process controls as well as people controls. So as I said earlier, it should be a collective responsibility. It will touch all key areas of an organization. So an organization is made of three things in general: people, process, and technology. So we will, as a security professional, we have to monitor and evaluate effectiveness of the security controls that are applied across all three key areas. And they will collect all the information and they will use it as part of the input for the next risk assessments. And risk assessment should be a periodic thing. It's not a one-time thing. Next thing we are looking at is due care and due diligence. The importance of due diligence and due care. So when we talk about due care, usually due care comes after due diligence. But we need to highlight what is due care is. So that is why we have placed it in the beginning. So due care means it talks about a reasonable effort an organization takes to protect its own interests or protects the consumer's interest. When we talk about protect the interest of an organization, it is not only it talks about many things: consumer interest, stakeholders' interest, and many other aspects of it. So due diligence, when we talk about due diligence, it is about ensuring we perform assessment, we identify the risks in the organization so that we can apply due care. So it is about being diligent to understand what is happening in the organization. So this is what it is. So basically, we need to keep assessing in an organization so that we can input the necessary care that is required for an organization. And if due care and the importance of due care and due diligence is more recently because of our regulations. So and also due to the reputational implications it has. So it also reduces. It becomes a legal responsibility due to the regulations. So since we spoke of regulations, the next topic is going to be compliance. So when we talk about compliance, what is compliance? So why we have to be compliant against certain regulations and laws? It is basically to prevent any repercussions, financial repercussions, financial penalties that would result due to as an organization being non-compliant to certain regulations when there is a breach. So awareness of these compliance-related laws and regulations is very important, as well as there are some standards. If we fall into a certain category, we have to follow some standards, relevant standards required. and we have to also be compliant to those relevant standards so that we can reduce or avoid financial repercussions or penalties. They can be set forth by governments and other private organizations. So government sets up the acts, private organization sets up the standards. So a standard could be PCI DSS requirements and things like that. And an act could be like an HIPAA Act, for instance, Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act. So it will be an internal ones. It can also be an internal and a self-imposed one, wherein we create policies so that we ensure we adhere to the guidelines which are required to be followed. So we need to always, when it comes to compliance related things, we need to follow or abide by legal department's guidelines to determine how a certain law affects our organization, or law or regulation affects our organization based on the industry and the region and location where an organization is placed in. The next topic is privacy. When we generally speak about security or cyber security, we think that privacy is part of it, since the most common CIA triad talks about confidentiality, integrity, and privacy. So if you look at it, yes, definitely privacy is kind of part of it. The key differentiator is when I personally identified information is present. So privacy is all about protecting an identity of an individual, of a personal. So you and me as a user, or let's say an organization's intellectual property. Yeah, an organization intellectual property is there. It doesn't have any PII information. It has to still be protected, but that does not cause any privacy concerns. But if an organization is going to collect a user's information like phone numbers, names, or anything when it comes to that, so that is where privacy comes into picture. That is why there is a separate model which is being followed for privacy. So security. So it is like this. Privacy cannot be without security, but security can be without privacy. So in the old ages, there was something called safe harbor. Now things have been changed. GDPR has brought in a strict regulation when it comes to EU, when it is related to privacy, and many countries are following suit. California has its own law when it comes to privacy. And the enforcement is on the high. So we are enforcing privacy. The privacy-related regulation has been enforcing penalties to different organizations when they are not following the required guidelines, and if there is a breach, of course. So it's very simple when it comes to exposing a person's identity. Even a name and phone number can lead to many things. So there were times wherein if the information is not valid, those things can affect. So we have to be very careful whenever we store information. At the same time, if an organization is collecting those information, as an organization, it should be very careful to protect. So this is going to be one of the interests of the organization. They should protect. So if an identity theft is on the rise. So if an identity is stolen, it can be used to do many things. And at the same time, for example, if your insurance details is stolen, like if your identity as part of your insurance details is stolen, this has been happening in the US for a while. So an attacker or a user, a malicious user, what they can do is a criminal, they can basically use the limits on your insurance, and they can empty the limit on your insurance for their personal gain. And when you go when you are in trouble and when you go to the hospital, if you don't have insurance left, or if there is no limit left, how will you get treated? So identity of a person is very important. So an organization should protect it at all costs. So that's the reason why privacy related laws are on the rise across the globe. So some of the privacy related personal PII information includes names, social security numbers, addresses, any personal characteristics, biometrics, which can be linked to a person. That should be protected. And a PII, once exposed, it may never be recovered. That is the most important thing. So you cannot change a person's information. So there are certain things, probably we can go change some numbers, you can get certain insurance, but there are certain things which cannot be changed. If I expose a biometric information, that's there for life, right? So that highlights the importance of why we have to be very careful when it comes to privacy. Okay. So these are some of the privacy related laws. Everybody knows GDPR, and California has its own law. There is a Privacy Act of 1974. It's there for a very long time, but then the new ones are gaining popularity because of the enforcement characteristics which comes along with them. So FERPA is for US when it comes to protecting educational related things, the kids and other activities. ECPA is again from US when it comes to electronic related protection. COPA is again from US, and PIPEDA is a privacy law of Canada. These are some of them, to name a few. All right. So now let's talk about computer crimes. There is a database which has the sensitive data. A cyber criminal is there. Their main purpose is to recover the data so that they can use it. So basically, their main purpose is to be against the CIA triad. One is recovering confidential information so that they can gain out of it, they can expose an organization's reputation, and other aspects of it. Another one is financial gains out of it. The other thing is of the CIA triad, what they go against is the availability. If the availability is not there, it will affect the business as a whole. Again, it will cause a loss to the organization. The third one is integrity of things. If people are able to change the integrity of the data, the organization will not have the right information to work with. So that's basically the third one. So these are some of the computer crime laws, so which are enacted to protect organizations against cyber criminals. So most of them are from a federal perspective, which is based out of US, which are highlighted here. And every country has, these are to name a few of them, and every country has its own cybersecurity laws across the globe. So these are some of the industry standards. So PCI DSS is an industry standard. So and NIST SP 800 series, these are like standard guidelines, principles which you can use. You can create framework out of it for an organization. ISO 27001, to get ISO 27000 certified, you need to be abide to ISO 27001 principles. It talks about different control groups, control objectives, which an organization can implement. COVID talks about an IT infrastructure related standard, what the IT operations and other activities, what can be followed to have a efficient organization. So these are industry standards. Usually PCI DSS, as I said earlier, it applies to card processing or payment card related industries. So it primarily talks about 5 different schemes of payment cards: Visa, Master, Discover, JCB, and MX. So basically, if your organization is going to deal with credit cards or payment cards, we have to abide by PCI DSS unless we would like to face some financial penalties at a later stage if there is a breach. PCI DSS provides you guidelines how an organization to can better protect itself and the data it stores. when it comes to payment card industry standards alone. Now we are in the topic of ethics. What is ethics? So when we speak about ethics, so this talks about it's from a personal standpoint. It's again principles, moral conduct, and how an organization or a person should behave, so that it does not affect others in general. So here, at an organization perspective, it's going to talk about what are the organization principles that are in place to protect proper conduct and moral values of individuals and also to protect the interest of an organization. So, a code of ethics is again a policy of an organization which helps professionals or all individuals in an organization or an organization as a whole to pursue common goals, to protect the integrity of the organization, of course. A code in general will always protect you against or safeguard an organization against. If you have a code and if you promote the culture of a code, it's going to safeguard an organization in the end. So that is what it is. It is going to safeguard your organization. If your organization has a code, it is much more better so that people will follow the code. It enforces the principle of moral values in individuals. So in the end, you get a better organized organization or an enterprise. And it also provides a guide what a professional should do rather than a will do. It should do, so that it'll protect the moral interest of an organization. So ethics is more about being moral and conducting ourselves in a way that does not defies moral values. So here we are going to talk about common computer ethics. So when we say something, what it is from an ethical perspective, or as in from a motives of an attacker, and what a criminal feel. When we say free information, or when they say free information, they think that all information has to be free. It is like everything should be open source. So they want their thought process works this way, that it should be transparent, because they do not understand that transparency can also bring harm. So their perspective is different. So it is like you keep something confidential. It means that you are holding some information. You are not being transparent, and you are having a different agenda. So a criminal feel that information needs to be, and they try different ways to bring it out. And they also take it as a challenge. When we talk about game, why do they think of it as a game? They also take it as a challenge. When you are secure, it becomes a challenge wherein they try to break your security so that they can gain reputation among their colleagues. So it is becoming a game kind of a thing. And then it is kind of lucrative. It makes them emotionally satisfied. So when we say taking candy from a baby, it is more of a metaphor. So if they think that if something is open and if I'm allowed to take it, I have to do that. So it is acceptable. They do not think that it is there for a reason. If they are not supposed to do that, they are not supposed to do that. No, they don't think that. And they also think that it is by making very small changes, it does not make. They do not think of the butterfly effect people talk about. So they think that small changes will not do a harm to our organization, but it can do. It can end up in very big things, and they fail to see that. And they also think that if it is going to be beneficial for somebody, then what they're doing is right. And from certain countries' perspective, they think that what they're doing is legal. They don't have to worry about the consequences. So that is one of the bad things. So legality means it does not mean that they don't have to worry about the consequences, but we cannot change how a criminal feels or does things. based on its own principles. But at least from a professional set of things, we should always think that there is somebody who's trying to get into our system to break the security. So we have to be always a step ahead. That is where being proactive is of utmost importance. So rather than reactive, say something is say when it comes to privacy, once it is gone, it's gone. You cannot go change that. So you have to be always on the protective side of things. So that's a very good example to start with. That does not mean that only for privacy we should be doing that. We should be always doing it. Even for intellectual property, once it is lost, it is lost. If there is a confidential information which should not be, which others should not have gained access to, and if we are going to lose that information, that is of higher concern. So we should not let criminals, due to their own principles, penetrate into our environment basically and steal things. So these are some of the code of ethics which ISC 2 talks about. So one is preamble. So what they talk about here is you have to be, or you have to adhere to the highest ethical standards of behavior. As a security professional or a CISSP, so this is one of the requirements. If you do not satisfy this requirement, you won't be a CISSP. If they found that you become a CISSP, and if they found that you are not following, you are not being ethical at any level, they are going to cancel the certification. That is one of the conditions to get the certification. Strict adherence is what they look at. And when you take the exam, you will also put a check mark on it. That's kind of the thing it is. So these are 4 mandatory canons which every CISSP must follow, or even without being a CISSP must follow. That is what I believe in. And same thing applies for following highest ethical standards wherever possible. So the 4 mandatory canons talks about, I will just read it because it is the statement taken out of directly from the CISSP's site. Protect society, the common good, necessary public trust and confidence, and the infrastructure. A person of CISSP caliber, they have to always endure to ensure society, the common good, necessary public trust and confidence and infrastructure is maintained and protected. The person should act honorably, honestly, justly, responsibly, and of course legally as well. Provide diligent and competent service to principals. So what we talk about here is we have to be diligent, as in we spoke of due diligence, the importance of it. Similar to that, we have to be diligent, we have to be repetitive, and we should always provide the best of care. We should give them the right options to people to protect the principles. And a person should not be stagnant. He should always keep up with the current trends, and he should always advance, that is, and protect the profession as a whole. Security profession, of course. So that is one of the reasons of CPEs. There is a requirement. So CPEs are nothing but continuous professional credits. So you need to gain them by gaining knowledge, and that is one of the reasons why they say advance and protect. So by gaining knowledge, you will know about the latest threats. If you know about the latest threats, you can work on mitigations. Security documentation. So when we talk about security documents, so we are going to talk about policies. Since you are with the topic of security documents, and I have been speaking for a very long time, please unmute yourself. If I'm being too fast, just let me know. If I'm clear, do let me know. But before that, let me ask you a question. Please answer this as well. So has anyone heard of ISMS or ISMS document? What is ISMS? Feel free to unmute yourself.
Sorry, could you repeat the question, please?
ISMS. So has anyone heard of ISMS? information security management systems?
Yes.
So what is it? What does it talk about? So would you like to say it? Or would you like to talk about it, ISMS in general?
It is related to the security management for the systems. What you have it is information systems. You manage the systems to the compliance of the security, like endpoint security, for network security, and all other things.
I would say that it's a kind of software who manages specific security areas.
Fantastic. And we also have a message from Lodek, policies and procedures to manage sensitive information. Fantastic. Nice answers, good ones. Anyone would like to add more to this?
It's actually related to the business continuity, and it will show exactly what's the impact and how it can have the if any problem happens to the how you can take care of these problems. If any attack happens, and how you secure your network, and how you make the policies and procedures you implement in your network or in your environment to not to have any attack or any risk threats to your network. So you have to see exactly what are the threats and what are the risks it can poses to the network or your systems, and how you can try to avoid or eliminate the things. And this is complete a management through various procedures and policies.
Fantastic answers. Fantastic answers. So, as everybody said, yes, the primary objective is to protect organization's critical assets, of course. And that these are the reason why I asked this is since we are talking about policy, ISMS is a framework about it is all about policies and procedures. So that's why I raised this question. So ISMS full form is Information Security Management Systems, and it is a set of policies and procedures. So rather than thinking of it only about sensitive data, let's put it this way: these are policies and procedures or frameworks created for an organization, which covers all aspects of ISO 27000. Just let me make it easier. So it covers all aspects of ISO 27000. That's what your the document will talk about. It will talk about physical security. It will talk about HR. It will talk about legal. It will talk about how a governance should work, risk management principles in an organization, cryptography. That is a information security policy document for an organization. That is what an ISMS is all about. And the main objective is to protect organizations' critical assets. The assets include data, of course, that is one of the critical assets. It will also include personal security. So as I said earlier, it will be protecting data, the people, and the process. So that is what it is all about. Policy is more about process and procedures. It is from an information security perspective. The easiest way to get it is it is more like an ISMS policy. It is ISMS policy for an organization. So there are three things when we talk about policies. Policies are more of a high level. It talks about purpose, scope, and other things. There will be procedures. It will talk about in detail about how we can implement procedures in different departments, or what to implement for different areas of an organization. And it will also come with guidelines on guidelines. Will talk about how to implement those. So policy talks about strategic objective of an organization, or and the policy will give you a overall perspective of an organization from security best practices. So standards in general, standards talk about an industry standard which is there So in general, everybody can intercommunicate. So it's more like if there is a standard, and if people follow standard, let's say creating an MP4 file, and there are many MP4 players or video players, all of them can open the MP4 files without any problem. That is what a standard is all about. So it is about setting an, as mentioned here, if we talk about a wireless standard, everybody knows about 802.11, A, B, C, E, sorry, A, B, C, G, and N. And when we talk about cellular standards, we are talking about 3G, 4G, 5G. So it is so that if there is a standard, and different companies can come build tools to adhere to the standard so that they can interoperate with each other. So that is what a standard is in general. So as mentioned earlier, a policy will always come with a procedure, which will also have a guideline. So as mentioned, guideline gives you the recommended and suggested best course of action. Procedure gives you what and how to implement those guidelines. And the fourth one, what is mentioned over here, is baseline. Baseline talks about, has any one of you have heard of hardening? What is hardening?
Hardening basically is to put some parameters, which is recommended parameters to safeguard your devices. Like hardening of the routers is related to how the people can access, who can access, and what are the ports should be open or closed. And similarly, hardening of any computer is related to what's the if it is a server, who can access it and who cannot, and what are the level of access and like policies you make it through. So it is the basic configuration for securing the device to the maximum of its benefit.
Yeah. So, for example,
I would say also adding measures and configurations and the features to protect and enhance overall security over systems and hardware.
yep, fantastic answer. Anyone else would like to say something?
I would like to say that if it is a parameters defining to use the device to the policies of any organization.
Fantastic answers. So all are related, yes. And has anyone heard of CIS controls? Or CIS benchmarks, Center of Internet Security Benchmarks?
No.
Okay. So CIS benchmarks have different set of things. These are, as mentioned earlier, hardening is all about. That is what a baseline is. Baseline is the minimum requirement, minimum security requirement an organization should follow. That is, how do you secure all your Windows servers? There should be a minimum security level. It should not go below the minimum. CIS provides you information. CIS, Center of Internet Security, has a lot of benchmarks or baselines available to harden your, for example, if we talk about Windows systems, they have a CIS benchmark for Windows. If you follow it, it gives you a set of principles to protect the Windows at a very minimum. For example, it'll talk about changing the default passwords. So that is one of the things which we have to do on all the systems. That is a small thing, and that is one of the most used attack vector because people fail to even change the default password, and it is known to everybody. All I have to do is Google, and I will know my default password. Even at home, We get a router, we don't even change the default passwords. So so these are some of the things which we have to do. So hardening or baseline gives you, thank you, Michael, thank you. Yes, hardening is like zero trust, where you open only ports that are absolutely required. And definitely. So this talks about what do you do. So when you take something out of the box, it's not like okay, we bought it off the shelf product, we install and deploy and start using it. It should not be that. They should be, because it will have its own set of vulnerabilities. When it comes to vulnerability, is not only about a functional vulnerability, it can also be a configurational vulnerability. If you leave everything open, as Michael just said, uh, if we leave all the services open, then it is prone to attack. Let's say there is a vulnerable service in the system and we don't even use it. So by disabling it, we are safeguarding that system or uninstalling it. So it is like deploy only what is needed, do not use everything. So anything in an organization, let it be a router, switch, an application, you should have a base principle. Or for instance, when it comes to HTTPS, right? So if we are still using SSL 3.0 TLS version 1 or 1.1, that is not the baseline. Our baseline should be at a minimum TLS 1.2, because everything else is having issues these days. And if we have to fall back, the maximum fallback should be TLS 1.1. So that is what a baseline is all about. It is setting a minimum requirement, so below which an organization does not go. And we should also continuously monitor the minimum requirement. So let's say we set a password policy as a requirement, and after some time over period, people have the tendency to go change it. Administrators, they will go and change certain settings. And so if we only do it, if it is a one-time activity, we will not recognize the change. So it should be a periodic activity. So something like a configuration compliance management tool could help, wherein you need to keep checking on things, keep checking for open ports, keep checking things which are not needed in a system. And if it is running, we need to find out why it started running, and we need to disable it. So that is what a baseline is. So a baseline will talk about. It will talk about what is the vulnerability level a system can have. And it talks about minimum security requirements. I have, even though I can improve more, I set up that I can live with this minimum security, and I can take the risk above this minimum security, so but not below it. So that is what a benchmark is all about, and you can use it as a yardstick to compare things. So that is what a baseline in general is going to talk about. The good thing about the next topic, I like it very much, risk management. So as I said earlier, you cannot have 100% security, and I'm open for debate when it comes to that. If anybody would like to raise their or speak about it. So when we say that there cannot be 100% security, there will always be risk. So if it is 90% security, there is still a 10% risk. So we need to find out the risks and how we can manage them. So that is the topic, and I really like this one. So these are the 4 key areas when it comes to risk management. So if people are familiar with ISO in general, ISO 27000 in general, we have plan, do, check, act kind of a thing when it comes to ISO. So we need to plan and perform and then check whether everything is okay. If it is not okay, we act. It's all the same cycle. Here we perform the risk analysis to identify the risk, prioritize which risks we have to work on, and then we started responding to those risks, and we keep monitoring the risks. So in this topic, we will also talk about risk register. But before we proceed further, what is risk in general? What qualifies a risk? Anybody would like to answer? Yeah.
Something may or may not impact directly the business and the company.
Okay, fantastic. Anyone else like to jump in?
Sorry, what was the question?
What is risk?
Risk is any threat or any thing which can make create a problem to your normal functionality, like anything which is stopping from performing the due character of the procedure of any device or anything. So anything which is stopping from not getting the normal performance, any abnormality or anything abnormality for any process, it creates a risk.
Yep, fantastic answer. So let me put it this way.
Can I
There are
add
three.
something?
Yes, go on, please. Sorry. Yes, go on.
Okay, the risk, it could be any event that appears that could affect the CIA triangle, confidentiality, integrity, and availability of the organization. However, it could be physical, could be on the systems, could be related to any process that
People,
could be
anything,
sorry,
yeah,
anything related
yeah.
and could affect the anything related to the CIA golden triangle. So it could be categorized as a risk and should be for sure analyzed to mitigate it and to check on which area could affect just to take the proper actions. And the whole ISMS systems related to ISO 27001 and the processes too are built to protect and to minimize the risks that could affect the organizations as proactive measures.
Fantastic answer, Georges.
In one word, we can say that any danger for any operation or anything related to any asset or anything which is materialistic or which can have a threat or a danger is a risk.
Very good answers. I'm very happy about all these answers. Yeah. So, very good points. I'm impressed actually. So all of those points are related, right? So let me put it in an easier way. Risk. So let's talk about a risk. If it does not materialize, it is not risk at all, right? Since we also spoke about asset, as we already said, asset of an organization is not only about data, it is about people, process, and technology, right? So anything which affects this, which has an adverse effect on these things, and it comes to the CIA triad part of it, it is a risk. And a risk, a risk can be a risk only if it materializes. If it does not materialize, then the risk is zero. Then which means it is no. So to put it in simple words, risk is nothing but risk can only materialize if there are three things. One main thing is an asset. So risk is a multiplication of asset, vulnerability, and threat. There should be an asset. If there is no asset, there is no risk. That is the reason why there is a multiplication of these three things. Yeah. So it is not an addition, it's a multiplication. So if one is zero, all the other are zero. So there is asset, there is a threat, but there are no vulnerabilities, which means that there is no risk. There is asset, there is vulnerability, but there is no threat, which means there is no risk. And risk can materialize when the threat comes in. Risk can materialize when there is a vulnerability. Yeah, I'm not saying no, but if one of these factors is not there, then there is no risk. So in simple words, risk is nothing but asset into vulnerability into a threat. Asset multiplied by vulnerability multiplied by threat is equals to risk. So when we do our risk analysis, we need to think about all these factors. When I talk about asset, even though the asset is there, if it is a test environment, we don't call it a critical asset. So even though if it fails, there is a risk to it. But then will it affect an organization? That is our thought process. That should be our thought process so that we can prioritize our risks and address the critical ones. There are 100 vulnerabilities in an organization or in a system. Let's say there is a Windows system and we have 100 vulnerabilities. We have 10 Windows system, which means that we have 1,000 vulnerabilities to patch. But out of these 10 systems, only 2 are critical. So we have to prioritize. We need to fix those 2 systems first. So that is from a vulnerability management principle. That is again addressing the risk, prioritizing and addressing the right risks is very important. If we start implementing security, for example, PCI DSS in general has a lot of things, and we will not have budget to implement it across organization. So that is the reason why when there is a PCI DSS program, they will find out the scoped assets and they will only concentrate on the in-scope assets. And they will fix the in-scope assets and not the out-of-scope ones. So if you're going to secure an organization, you need to find out the right risks so that you can prioritize and respond to them rather than addressing all risks of an organization. Because some of them can be acceptable. That is the reason. So we will talk about that in the next few slides. Am I being very slow?
I'm sorry, when you are saying risk to any material, I mean, if there is no material exactly an asset, then there is no risk. In other words, is it?
So let's say there is a vulnerability in a particular car. I'm not only talking about material. So an asset for an organization is not only material.
Yeah, this is what I was thinking. Usually, like a company's name and it's the
people in the company.
People,
people, process, technology, everything is an asset for an organization. The data it holds, all those things are asset for an organization. That's not limited to material. But what you're saying is fact. I'm going to explain it to you in a different way. You are aware that there is a model of a car which has a vulnerability, and currently people are exploiting that vulnerability. But is it a risk for you? But you don't even have that car with you. That is an asset, but that asset has a vulnerability, and there is a threat factor in the wild which are exploiting that vulnerability. But you don't even have that car. So will that be a risk for you as an organization?
It will not, because it is not related to my organization.
Exactly. So that is what we are talking about. So when we say risk, it is about the analogy of the car works like that. So you have a different car. You don't have to worry about a risk in a different car. So risk talks about assets of an organization and the vulnerability which is in the asset and the threat factor that are trying to exploit the asset. So if any one of these things is not there, then the risk is not there. So that is what it was all about. So this is the risk analysis process. So in the analysis process, we will be doing asset identification and valuation. So this is like asset classification. That is what we are trying to do. And then we have to identify the vulnerabilities. And then we need to perform threat assessments to determine the threats in the wild which can exploit the vulnerabilities. And that is where you get a risk assessment. And once you have a risk assessment, you need to also perform a financial impact evaluation to know how to address the risks. So that is where we are talking about. You cannot address every single risk in an organization. You need to prioritize and address the right risks so that your organization's interests are protected in all possible ways. Say if you're going to address all the risks in the organization, you are introducing a new risk when it comes to the financial position of the organization. So that is what it was talking about. There is something called inherent risk and another one called residual risk. So this is more of a quantitative assessment. I will also talk about inherent and residual risk in a while. But this is talks about a quantitative risk assessment. It's more of a formula which you can use to find the asset value and exposure factor of an asset value. What will happen if there is an impact and what is the likelihood of that impact to happen? And then you get a risk. That is more like it will be an annual loss expectancy so that you can plan it. Let's say, for instance, if there is a loss annually, if an asset is lost, is $20,000, but implementing a security measure for that asset is $25,000. What will you do in that scenario? I hope everybody got the question. Let me ask this again. Yeah.
Sorry, didn't get the question exactly.
Yeah.
You are saying that if someone is having 20,000 and if it is lost, what would happen? I didn't tell you.
You have an asset in your organization. If there is a loss of this particular asset, yeah, and you will lose $20,000. But implementing a security measure for the same asset will require you to spend $25,000. What will you do in that case?
Depending on the purpose of the asset is important, because if this asset is very much critical for the organization, then it's better to either buy as an alternate for it and keep it as a backup, or if it is not possible to get the likelihood of the product, then you keep spend whatever the money to just to keep the things running.
No, what I was referring to is, if for an organization, the loss of that particular asset. Let's say let me put it in an easier way. So you have a car and you bought it for $10,000. Okay, if you lose the car in an accident, it is only $10,000. Okay, but the insurance company, if they come to you and say, you can pay me $11,000 to protect your car, will you be buying $11,000 insurance or security measure, or you'll be okay with losing $10,000?
No, if there is no value for it, you will
Exactly.
not lose.
Exactly. That is the purpose of risk assessment, to identify annual loss expectancy, so that the last part, which it says, right, ALE, so that you will understand whether you can accept the risk. Even if it loses, it's not a problem. But then that is how you will spend. You will create a budget. You will spend the budgets in the right way. So that is the purpose of this risk analysis. And this is usually the quadrant which you have to identify the highest risk to the lowest risk. So the the topmost under catastrophic, which is mentioned here, is the highest one. So you will first address that and you will go down the line that way. So that is what it is talking about. So this is nothing but a risk metrics. And the next one is going to talk about risk response. So these are 4 possible risk response you can do. The $10,000 and the $11,000 which we spoke of is risk acceptance. You'll be okay if I lose, I'm going to lose only 10,000. I don't want to invest on something. That is what risk acceptance is. Risk transfer. Let's say same $10,000 car, but you will buy a $1,000 insurance, so that if something happens, insurance can cover you. That is, you are transferring the risk to the insurance company. So that is what risk transfer is all about. Risk mitigation is about, there is going to be a risk to this particular car. There is a door which is malfunctioning, and when you cross the door, there is a barricade. Let's put it that way. There is a risk that the barricade is going to create a problem for you, but you have the option to fix that barricade of your house, right? So you go and fix that so that you are mitigating the risk. And avoidance, there is a car which has a problem, and you don't want to even buy that. I mean, you need to go for a different card, that is risk avoidance. So these are 4 possible responses for a risk once you analyze and prioritize the risk. The very high risk you will try to avoid. The ones you can mitigate, you mitigate them. So at this stage, before the risk response, what happens is the risk is called inherent risk. After risk response, there will be a certain amount of risk that comes under risk acceptance. That is called residual risk. That is, you have put in some controls, and after that, you get residual risk, and that is something which you can live with. So the controls can be of 3 types. It can be administrative control, which is like process control, physical control, and technical control. You can physically block access, and the technical controls are like you can put in password policies and things like that using systems. So these are the types of control which we can have for risk management. So we have already covered this topic. Residual risk is the risk which is left behind after we apply the controls. Okay. So we are going to talk about threat modeling. Threat modeling gives you an idea to identify and assess the threat agents, right? The attack vectors. Since we spoke of the threats, we need to find a way to address these threats. So Stride was introduced by Microsoft. So it talks about different threats available, like spoofing, tampering, etc. Stride has a full form as well. Spoofing, if I remember it right, it's more of spoofing, tampering, repudiation, information disclosure, denial of service, elevation of privileges, if I'm not wrong. So DREAD is another model which talks about different things. So in the end, we are talking about threats and their capabilities, and how we are going to analyze them is what the next steps are. So based on the threats capabilities, so if there is an elevation of privilege, that is a risk, but then if that elevation of privilege is likelihood to happen is very low, so then the risk level is low. So this is what a threat modeling is all about. It's going to talk about the threat in itself. So there are 3 ways to classify the threats. There are active ways and passive ways. Passive ways is collecting information. Active ways is monitoring your environment for actual threats. And there are manual and automated, and there are like internal threats and external threats, like insider threat and outsider threat. So there are single event threats, there are persistent threats as well. So which are repetitive and things like that, which are not easy to detect. So threat remediation involves so as I said, anyway, security talks about everybody working together. So it involves every personnel working together to remediate any threats. So because the threat can be of anything, it affects a process in an organization. If a person is not willing to follow something, then that is a problem for an organization. So it requires a collective effort. So that is the reason why security should be an organizational culture, not an individual team's responsibility. So and the remediation will be across all 3 levels for people, process, and technology. So that's basically what it talks about. When we talk about various security departments should coordinate with each other to remediate things. Remediation policy should reflect risk tolerance of an organization. So risk tolerance is nothing but risk acceptance, which an organization can tolerate when the risk materializes. And it will also it should also have strategies and controls that should be consistently evaluated. The reason is you need to evaluate your current controls. You need to know, and with the threat landscape. So that's when you will understand what is happening today in your organization, whether it is enough to protect against the current threat landscape. If it is not, you need to improve it. So that is the reason why it is mentioned here. So these are some of the threat remediation principles you need to have in an organization. And it should also be as part of your policy. So business continuity, everybody knows it's about ensuring the business continues as it is or to an acceptable level when there is a disaster. So it talks about pre-planning things so that we do not panic when something happens, something bad happens. So it has 4 main steps. You need to scope and plan, and you need to perform an impact assessment. You need to perform a continuity plan, and you need to have an approval from the top management and their support so that you can implement that continuity planning. So that's basically what a business continuity is all about in simple terms. So this is primarily the difference between BCP and a disaster recovery plan. BCP talks about in the event of a disaster, your business will continually run. So that is what happened with many organizations when it came to COVID-19. We switched to things. And there were organizations who were reluctant about going into, for instance, very simply put, as the disaster recovery plan is, there is a disaster and you don't do anything to revive it. There is no continuity plan. So you work out a disaster plan and you bring the organization back from the ground up. So that is a disaster recovery plan. So to state an example, during this COVID-19, what happened is there were organizations who already knew and they were developing plans for events like this, or not at this not at this grand end of what we went through. It's crazy. Nobody would have expected that. But at the level of remote access and everything was there in an organization. But banking sector, if you look at the banking sector, they were avoiding remote access in most places. So they were struck. So now they are working on plans to avoid anything like this in the future. They are learning and they are working on plans to have remote access capabilities as well. So this is the difference between business continuity plan and disaster recovery plan. So if you don't have a business continuity plan, you have to start from scratch. And disaster recovery plan will help you speed up the process. It is not as good as a business continuity plan. That is what it is all about. It is not the disaster recovery plan.
In this case, BCP is more a proactive effort, and DRP is more reactive effort.
Fantastic. That is what I was coming at. Very nice answer. Yes, exactly. But if you ask me, you cannot just say my organization has BCP and I don't need a DR plan. So you need both. It is not that a proactive approach is 100% foolproof. There will always be some way or the other, there will be a problem. So you need to have a reactive approach as well. They have to work in a tangent to have a better security for an organization. But we need to understand the difference so that we can highlight the importance of them, and people more like justifying it, why we need it, so that organization implements it. All right. Very nice answer. So business impact assessment is going to tell you these are assessment basically done to justify the need of a BCP. You understand that problems it could occur and if there is an impact, and you project these things to the management so that you get justification out of it. That is basically it is. So this is what what we are talking about is maximum tolerable downtime. This is what we talk about. This is where we talk about RPOs and RTOs. So there is something called recovery point objective. There is something called recovery time objective. Anyone is aware of that?
Yeah, especially technical guys know about it.
Exactly. But as the name goes, it's as the name suggests. Say recovery time objective. Even so, because people in DB admins would be knowing about this RTOs and RPOs. But see, that is the beauty of security. It's always in plain English. It is clear. It says recovery time objective. The other one says recovery point objective. Recovery time talks about how soon you need to come back. Recovery point talks about how much data you are okay to lose. So let's say, for instance, if a disaster happens now, my last backup is yesterday, then the time it is going to recover is going to, let's say, 1 day, but then you will only get data from yesterday, not today. So, but if you're 1 hour back, you will get 1 hour back data from the time of disaster. So that is what we need to calculate. You cannot have 99% uptime or live plans, but then you should have a tolerable limit. So that is where you create your recovery time objective and recovery point objective. Recovery time objective talks about the availability of data. Recovery point objective talks about the data loss which you are okay with. So critical transactions, of course, banking transactions, recovery point objective will be much higher than any other non-critical transactions. Okay. So this is what we are talking about, hardware and software acquisition. So whenever we buy hardware and software, we need to evaluate the built-in security features and things like that. For example, there was a ransomware which was targeting the chip. So even if you boot, it is not at the OS level. Even if you boot the system with a different OS, the malware can still infect. So that is where I'm not promoting any company. I'm saying this, but then HPE has a principle wherein they also check their chip level integrity. If the chip is damaged, it will recover the chip first, and then it'll proceed with the booting of the operating system. So that way, even if the chip level ransomware is there, it is mitigated. So that is what it is. That is what we are talking about, hardware built-in security features. So, and the second thing is we should also be talking about it is after acquisition. The first thing we need to look about is baselining the hardware. We need to benchmark our baselines. We need to implement those baselines. And software, whenever we buy software, we should also evaluate the security features of the software, find out whether it has vulnerabilities or what are the vulnerabilities it had in the past and how soon the vendor has fixed it. You should also talk about software escrow agreements. When we talk about software escrow, anybody has any idea about it? Software escrow agreements and the importance of software escrow agreements?
Yeah, escrow means you have to collect the code after completing the life cycle of the software. So that if any time any problem happens, you are not going to lose the software if the vendor of that software goes off the market.
Yeah, so exactly. But most vendors will not give you the software code, right? If it is not open source. So yes, so software escrow agreements are ensuring that even if the vendor is planning to go out of the market, at that point in time, they should give us the software, or they should have a metrics for the support of things. So that is what software escrow agreement is all about. Okay. So I'm just laughing at what Michael Chen's chat was. Yeah, very nice, Michael. If you guys want to have a laugh, you can look at your chat messages. Michael has sent something which is very interesting. Service acquisition. So this is talking about outsourcing, third-party management, getting something as a service. So we have to be diligent about this aspect as well, because we are going to use a third-party services. We do not directly control. We don't know their security of their environment. We don't know what is the policy. We don't know the ethics they follow. So we have to perform our due diligence and ensure we also perform due care to meet any constraints we have, like putting in a contractual in the contractual agreement statements which will safeguard the organization. So that is what the service acquisition part will cover, and risk analysis as part of this. And as I said, third-party assessment is any third party which we are going to deal with. Service is always done by third parties. So it's going to cover the same thing. We need to have non-disclosure agreements, every aspect of it. That is what a third-party assessment would cover. And it is it'll open whole new things in itself. I don't want to dive deep into this, and I know that we've already exceeded the limit, and I believe we are almost done. So let me quickly check. Personal security. So it talks about employment agreements, code of conduct, making the personnel to follow things, and we should also ensure we protect our employees. So that is what it is talking about. So we should also ensure when it comes to employees, we need to have separation of duties, need to know least privilege, job rotation is important, mandatory vacations, there are regular passwords. There are some technology controls. There are some process controls. For instance, mandatory vacations is a process control. Technology control is more like passwords and things like least privilege, assigning least privilege. So we need to ensure all these are in place, and so that the person is also protected, and technology. I'm not sure if people have attended my previous webinar on the weakest link. So usually in security, people are considered the weakest link. So we need to have ways to protect the person. They are the most vulnerable part of an organization. So since we kept saying the people are also an asset, we need to ensure we protect the asset in different possible ways. So that is why we have many principles. These are to name a few. There are many more principles to protect the person or person of an organization, employee of an organization. And security awareness is one of the key things to make sure we secure the weakest link. So we need to ensure our training is engaging. We need to train that. There is a difference between training and awareness. Training is making sure they are, it is repetitive, they train you, you need to deliver these trainings. Awareness is what they learn and what they do. It's like posters and things like that. So those are awareness. So these are the possible ways to reinforce security when it comes to the weakest link of our organization, which are people. Okay, we are done. So how Ingram Micro cybersecurity can help organization. So we at Ingram Micro, we have a team of cybersecurity experts who are trained in many aspects of things, and we can assist you when it comes to trainings, solution designing, consultancies, technical assessment, managed security services. You name it, we have it. So we also created some tools which will be of use to people. We have something called our toolkit. It has discovery reports. What it does is, if you want to know about your organization threat landscape, you can send an email to us or respond to the invite. So we will be more than happy to assist you. So what it does is it will find out vulnerabilities that it is more of a passive recon. We try to be as passive as we can. We try to find out from a hacker's view or a criminal's view to find about your organization outside your organization. So that is what our discovery does. Virtual lab is, we have a lab in our environment with all security vendors we support. What we do is we host the vendor products over there so that you don't have to lift and shift products or deploy it on an environment, create an environment in your organization. This is a lab wherein you can gain access, view it, test the products, do POCs, whatever you wanted to see, showcase demos and things like that. We have a virtual lab. CyberGram is a cybersecurity maturity assessment tool, which is again built in-house by our consultants experts. It is a tool based on NIST framework. So it assesses, it is more of a questionnaire. It is as good as your answers. So if you answer the right things, it will give you a report on things, and it will tell you how the ways you can improve your current security posture. Multi-vendor architecture is more of the principle one of the principles we follow. Say we create solutions rather than only satisfying a requirement like check in the box. If you come to us, we create the right solution. It will not be only one solution. We will ensure to satisfy all your requirements. So that is what it is. And the building over there is our office building in Dubai Internet City. That is where we are at, in the first and second floor. This is our holistic portfolio. We cover all three pillars of an organization: people, process, and technology. We have foundational trainings. We do assessment. We do consultancy services. We do managed security services, and we have this technology out of the META region. And we are a global organization as well. So the technologies mentioned here, the cybersecurity vendors mentioned here is only for META region, but we do support a wide more variety, more vendors at a global scale, more security vendors. And that is where we're at. So any questions, I'm more than happy to assist, and we are done for today. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask. I'm available for you. If everyone is happy, we will share the webinar link shortly, recording. We have a YouTube site. We will share this recording as a YouTube link. And using the YouTube link, you will be able to see the past events as well. But it'll be a generic one, so it will not have exactly the names of the person who has did it, but you can see all the past webinars, trainings, and everything. If that is all, thank you very much everyone for joining, and it was a pleasure talking to you, and thank you for making this event eventful by asking questions and answering them. Fantastic. Cheers everyone. Have a good day, stay safe.